We have to do a time clap.
Oh,
I
let's
don't
do
think
a
it
clap.
ever really makes a difference because what would we do if we were out of sync?
Well, when we edit it.
Oh, yeah.
Generally, it's pretty good about keeping everything in sync.
Yeah.
Should we do
Hang on,
13, 17?
There's a bit of an emergency on my end. I'm currently in Japanese keyboard. Give me 1 second.
Which computer are you on?
I'm on my personal one. I don't even know how this happened. Well, I don't even know what the shortcut is to do this.
You try Control Space?
That just brings up the spotlight search. I should have already known that.
Try the function button.
God, this is the most professional intro we've done so far.
Have you tried Alt F4?
Is there something you can click on in the top?
All right, I've done it.
Okay.
I'm back in English mode. What was it I was looking up again?
Time.is.
Oh, yeah, time.is. Wait, I'm still in Japanese mode.
Are you?
Welcome to In the Skies of Love, a critical review podcast about the anime series Legends of the Galactic Heroes. I'm Kamel, a newcomer to this revered series, and your companion on this adventure. Joining me are Tom and Joel, two die-hard fans of the show. Each week, we'll review and analyze an episode, exploring its characters, plot, and themes, and asking new questions about this influential TV show. So please, join us on our journey through the skies of love. So, Joel, Tom, we're covering episodes 12 and 13 this galactic week. Attack on the Empire and When It Rains, It Pours. Should we start with episode 12?
Shall I read the intro? Or do you want to read the intro?
How many names has it got in this one? You know what? Maybe you can read it.
Okay, I'm going to read the intro. Episode 12, Invasion of the Imperial Territory. In the Free Planets Alliance, the capture of Isilon Fortress has intoxicated the public, the military, and the politicians. It is now possible to invade the Galactic Empire from Isilon, and many people think it is time to conclude the crusade against tyranny. In a High Council meeting, Secretary of the Treasury João Rebelo and Secretary of Human Resources Huang Rui think it is better to sign a peace treaty because the economy is on the verge of collapse. But Royal Sanford, the Supreme Chairman, explains that they will lose the next election unless they achieve a substantial military victory. So the High Council decides to invade the Empire. Only Job Troonhike sides with Rebelo and Huang. The invasion plan is drafted by Commodore Andrew Falk, it says here, but Falk in the original. An ambitious man, so sure of the righteousness of the war that he discards any objections, especially those made by Yang, as siding with the enemy. The Free Planets Alliance will send a force of 8 fleets, comprising of 30 million men and 200,000 spaceships, under the overall command of Fleet Admiral LaSalle Lobos, with Admiral Dwight Greenhill as second in command. Meanwhile, in Fazan, Adrian Rubinsky warns the Imperial High Commissioner Jochen von Remscheid that the Alliance is planning a full-scale invasion of the Empire. There's a lot of names in that one.
There's a lot of names. That's actually something I have written down in capital letters as a show note. So many characters.
We are introduced to just a smorgasbord of different characters from both sides.
Is he called Falk? That does seem like a more sensible surname than Fork, which is what my subtitle said.
I would imagine this is just a mistranslation of the katakana, right? That he should be Admiral Falk, but they called him Admiral Fork.
Fork, yeah, it's a bit, could be either, I suppose. Yeah. It looks like it should be with an O, according to the Japanese.
It's much funnier that it's Fork.
Fork is what he's going to be in my heart for the whole show. I think the baked-in subs do say Fork, even if the fans have agreed it's actually Falk.
There's a scene in this episode where they just read out character names for like 90 seconds, just one after another.
The funny thing is, seeing this scene the second time round, I was like, yeah, I remember that guy and this one. And there's like some important characters that they just introduced for the first time, just in this like list of names. But the first time around you watch it, you just have no idea, and you forget all of them immediately.
Yeah, it's true. It's very like space opera storytelling. They're like, here are 24 different characters, and you're going to have to remember most of them because they're going to be important, but we're not going to give you any time with them.
Is Star Wars a space opera?
This is a point of contention, I think. I think people would probably call it a space fantasy, but it does have all the hallmarks of a space opera. But it's probably space fantasy first, right? Not that these labels really mean very much.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I ask is because of when I think of the equivalent meeting scene, like when the rebellion's all meeting up to discuss how to destroy the Death Star, it's not like Luke goes, okay, now to take minutes, let's just introduce everyone around the table,
right,
one after the other. I don't know anyone's names around that table besides the main people.
Do you think it would have been helpful if George Lucas had included everyone's name, just baked into the film underneath them as they were introduced?
I'm sure that was in the first draft, and then Brian De Palma was like, no.
George. So episode 12 and episode 13, these are two important episodes, I think, especially coming off the back of the last two. Do you want to tell me your overall thoughts on the whole experience, Kamal?
I felt like these two related quite well. They like mirrored each other. Obviously, they're speaking to the same events, but in how they depict the Republic and the Empire and their approach to their own citizens is mirrored, I think, pretty well. I was kind of bored in the second episodes when it got to the personal storytelling of one Imperial soldier in particular. But the most interesting stuff to me was like the council meetings and stuff. That was the best part for sure.
I think that's quite interesting because it's the second episode is way more like of a small or short story as part of the as part of like delivering the situation that is going on. And the first episode is like, I looked back on it after finishing, and not really a lot happens, but it just drops a huge amount of information on you, and sets up a lot of the pieces for what's coming next. And it's very quite compelling, I think, to watch. It's like I thought it was a good episode, but it's almost like 20 minutes worth of just setting up things for what's coming next.
Yeah.
And at an extremely rapid pace as well.
Yeah, it definitely sets the stakes for everything that's about to come. But it does, it feels more like a sort of political intrigue episode, or like at least setting up the different players in this political system that we're going to be spending time with. Then the second one, which, as Kamal says, is much more of just a short story. We focus like way in on one specific planet and one specific family in episode 13. And the effect the war has had on them.
I understand that approach to storytelling. Like, I understand as a writer why you would do something like that, to understand how these big decisions made by groups of men and one woman in a meeting room affect real people elsewhere on the other side of the galaxy. But I don't know. I was so deeply uninterested in the people they chose to focus on, in particular in that little short story, that it just didn't work for me as well as I wanted it to.
I agree. I think we can talk about Ulrich's Sound of Music rip-off storyline after we've talked about episode 12.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is a little bit. There are good things and bad things about episode 13. I definitely think this melodrama is not super interesting. But we'll get into it when we talk episode 13.
One of the things I would think the reason why episode 13 doesn't work as well for 12 for me is that 13 is paced quite slowly, whereas 13 it covers a huge amount of time, it feels like, very quickly. And it starts with them heading to a strategy meeting, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'd forgotten this detail at the beginning of the episode where they are driving to the strategy meeting and like the central computer has gone down. And this mundane kind of hiccup in the civic bureaucracy is causing them so many problems. I think it's a pretty effective opening because it gets them into the helicopter with Trebello in a pretty kind of natural way. It doesn't feel forced. So you get to have that conversation with a person who's about to go into the cabinet meeting.
Yeah.
So we're not just like cold cut into the cabinet meeting. We get to see him outside of it first. And also it highlights what he was saying about all of the engineers have gone off to war. We're not just told by the cabinet that the economy of the Republic is falling apart. We see that the bureaucracy is falling apart just through a traffic jam. I thought it was kind of a cute opening and pretty efficient, I think, for the first few minutes.
Yeah, I was thinking, I did have this thought that they've got such advanced technology. Why can't they just, get onto Zoom and like join the meeting remotely? But then clearly they've not got like working internet if they can't even manage the traffic system.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, people do use Zoom in the show. It's incredibly prescient in that sense. But I guess, yeah.
So they get into a helicopter, don't they? And head to the meeting, and they fly over Jesus the Redeemer statue of the founding father of the Republic.
Heinesen.
They fly really close to it. Like I was watching this episode, like Jesus, if I was in that helicopter, I would not be feeling comfortable. But yes, they pick up a member of the political class in this helicopter in military hardware, which to me feels like a little bit of a mixture of the military and the state sort of. That is perhaps, I don't know what their constitution looks like, but I thought it was weird. But yes, they have this conversation with Trebello, who again I had not realized appears so early in the show. He is one to watch as we continue through the story.
He says, they say something like, "What do you think? What's the name of the original leader of the Republic?
Heinesen.
Is it Heinesen?" And they're like, "What would he be thinking if he could see the situation now?" And they'd be like, "Oh, he'd be rolling in his grave, or he's turning in his grave," as they go past this enormous statue of the man. And you think, like, maybe he would have also been turning in his grave if he'd seen that statue built. If he really was this, figure that people bring up in this kind of as this true hero or
this humble
leader
of a great democracy.
Right, yeah.
Is he a symbol that's just used as a cudgel for politicians to make their point in the way that like Republicans do in the States and stuff with the founding fathers?
They definitely have a civic religion in the Republic, right? Like they talk about Heinesen constantly. And there are some later episodes where they go into the history of the Republic, and some of the symbolism around the Republic's founding has become almost like mythical to the people of the Republic. So there's definitely like an American style civic religion in.
You kind of already see it happening with Yang Wenli as well, right? I think we talked about this last time. They're all calling him Miracle Yang, and they have all these. Yeah. He's already been used as a political tool, just as like in that photo opportunity and stuff. So it's a bit of a pattern, I suppose.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stuff that's going on in the Republic is. I don't know, this kind of desperation for a strong man, right? Like, which you see throughout republics in history, with like Julius Caesar or even a character like Winston Churchill, where you're sort of like willing to forgo all of your democratic principles for the sake of aesthetics, basically, and for the sake of safety.
They're in wartime right now. Yeah, they haven't got that currently. Like the council run everything. There is no singular leader of the Republic. Is that right?
Yeah. But it does seem like from what Trebello is saying that having a cabinet, like a war cabinet, is a novel, like political innovation, right? Like they did not, it seems like, at least from what he said, maybe we can bring up the quote in the edit maybe, but he says like, how is like a bunch of people making decisions in a small room like akin to democracy? Like, how is this democracy? It doesn't have any transparency, which to me suggests that having a cabinet was not part of the initial founding of the republic, which is, I think, also mirrored in other republics, like in the UK with the Privy Council and all these sorts of things. There's a question about how democratic it really is to have these institutions.
So does the Republic have like a broader parliament or something that Jessica Edwards got elected to?
I guess so. Do we ever see it in the show, like physically as a building? Like, of course, there's the sort of big room where they held the military kind of triumph, I guess, early on in the show. But that didn't seem like a council chamber, right? But it did say it was the headquarters of the democratic government. So we have this conversation in the helicopter, and is it Badsha, the kind of main military leader, who says not every soldier loves war, as Trebello's leaving for his cabinet meeting. Did you get the impression that this like tipped the scales for him, or did you get the impression that he always had this position before he went into the meeting?
But before that discussion, he talks about the expense of having taken 500,000 prisoners at Iceland Fortress.
Mm-hmm.
The economics of everything seemed to be driving his position. That's what it read to me as.
Yeah.
So I think he was always going to have that position. That he states in the meeting that we should not be doing this crazy military strategy that good old Falk is suggesting.
Yeah. Trustworthy old Falk. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was funny when he's like, oh, the economy is going to be in shambles if we commit to this. And then the guy's like immediately like, we'll just print more money. Don't worry about it. And you're like, it's like just money printer go brr joke in a anime from the 1980s.
The show really is like prescient in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I have just finished listening to the first season of Blowback, the Iraq War podcast.
Yeah.
And man, those guys are professionals. I was listening to it like, God, we're such amateurs on this show. But they like listening to that show about.
You meant the people running the Iraq War.
No, the guys doing the podcast. Right, okay. So yeah, in Blowback, they kind of go into what's going on inside of Bush's war cabinet just before the Iraq War. And it's surprising. Like, I guess things never change, but the kind of rhetoric that is bouncing around inside the cabinet about the economy or about like spreading democracy. And there's a big question mark around how many people actually believed this and how many people were just playing, other people who are less clued in. Because definitely it seems like there were very stupid people in Bush's cabinet who genuinely believed that that's what they were doing. They did believe they were on like a crusade or whatever. Whereas other people were definitely just using this as a cudgel to get what they wanted. And you're like, yeah, the show, I don't know, yeah, there's a lot that's captured. And you think of all this stuff as new, but yeah, it's not new at all.
They do use the terminology to overthrow a despotic government, right?
Yeah.
This came out when? 1889?
89 or 90 maybe now we're at.
And was that around the first Gulf War or something?
It must have been very close to it. So it probably was going on concurrently with the release of the show. So it's very possible that the show took inspiration from that. I've not read the original book, so I don't know what liberties have been taken with the script writing.
I'm just curious because the language is so specific.
Yeah, it's so similar.
Yeah, but it must be referencing a specific, military incursion by the US or similar country, it doesn't seem likely that he just invented this out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did make me think, is one of the people who like pushes that we've got to invade and get rid of these tyrants who are ruling the empire. Are they going to reveal at some point that the empire has access to this boundless resource that the republic can then use to, their like faltering economy?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there going to be an introduction of a sort of spice from Dune, which itself was a reference to much more mundane oil in real life?
Yeah.
I don't think the show has any mention of anything like that, which is interesting when you bring it up. Like,
and the situation is sort of different in a way, isn't it? This is not a there's not really a realistic chance of defeating or even necessarily making much of an impact in challenging the empire. A lot of people in the room are extremely skeptical and concerned about this battle plan or lack of battle plan. Unlike invading Iraq or something like this, where it was the dominance of one country over the other, and military strength is very large. This is
two equal powers or similarly strong powers.
Yeah. Well, then it makes it seem like when the politicians are suggesting when they're moralizing the conflict and like saying it's about justice or whatever, if there's no resource to be extracted, if they're of equal size and equal weight, they're in the same weight class, then it seems like they actually believe this, and it's not just a precursor to getting something they need out of it.
Yeah, that is true. I think that, we know that some of these people want political careers, right? This is something that he brings up about Andrew Falk, that part of his kind of warmongering is in order to get like a powerful office in the cabinet. But in terms of like resource extraction, there's nothing directly mentioned at any point. The only like oil-like substance that the show has, Zephyr particles. They never go into like how these are made or whether there's any special resource required to do that. It shows us not very interested. I think the show is pretty interested in ideology, and it's for the most part fair to assume that people who don't have any personal interest in improving their own position really do believe the things they're saying in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I do think it's a show that's interested in ideology. I don't know if you'd agree, Tom. But...
I think so. I think, I'm not sure if I have a good answer for why it would seem like a good idea to attack the Empire, which I think is, bigger and maybe as probably more powerful, despite losing Isilon Fortress, and has this new tactical genius as part of their military, who gets mentioned by multiple people during this episode on the Republic side as a sort of, source of preoccupation and wonder almost. That why it would be a good idea to try and take them on, or why the moment was really right. And a lot of people are asking these questions in the room, like Yang Wenli, for example. I don't know.
I think, go on.
I think it doesn't really come across to me that people really, although they deliver the rhetoric through ideology as why they want to do this, I didn't really get the impression that anyone is really doing it for those reasons out of the people who push for it during this meeting. It seems more like political rivalries within the room that are driving it forwards out of selfishness, I suppose.
In that sense, is it closer to like a Starship Troopers than Dune, where like the war has been going on so long that it is like key to many people's careers and to their security, in their position.
Mhm.
And so basically perpetuating this state of war is like, if they don't do it, then they're going to lose their position. They're going to have to find a new job, and they're going to lose all this power.
Right. The one of the guys in the council meeting at the beginning, after he's like, interesting ideas from both sides. Now look at this graph of our voting approval rates and our disapproval rates.
Yeah.
And he suggests if we get a, what did he say, like a massive military victory in the next 100 days, we'll get reelected.
Guys, if we can meet these KPIs during this sprint, then I think we're in with a chance. It's like talking about war like a game. Yeah, just and even Trebello even says this, right? He's like, who are we as politicians to send off like millions of men to die just for the sake of our own political careers? And then anime Margaret Thatcher laughs at him and says, "Oh, how naive you are. This is just how it's done."
She had a good voice actor.
Yeah.
She seemed believably evil.
Yeah. I mean, she was also called Cordelia Windsor, which, like, I don't know. It seemed like a pretty blatant Maggie Thatcher reference to me, but it could be wrong.
How do we feel about Andrew Falk himself? I was going to put like a prefix title to do his name, but then I thought that might be biased.
Yeah. You didn't want to. Yeah. I think he's a stand-up guy. I mean, I think he's been given an unfair rep by everyone else in the room. I mean, he's the one with the plan, right?
He does have a plan. Seems like he's been working on it for ages. A lot of details, a lot of
whatever he works on, he really just he sinks his teeth into. Sorry, not his teeth, his prongs. It's great when he shows up. When Yang Wenli's like, after the council has announced what their decision is, we're going to do this giant military operation, and Yang Wenli is, what a stupid fucking idea. We're going to lose that. And Andrew Falk is like, excuse me.
I love there's like 3 people in that room at the time, and he just happens to be the other guy who Yang Wenli doesn't know. It's like, I'll just say this in front of him. Turns out to be the one guy who came up with the plan, quotation marks.
It's so great that Yang Wenli doesn't know him as well, because their commanding officer tells him, he's been obsessed with you since the academy. He thinks of you as his rival. He wants to defeat you so badly. Whereas Yang Wenli is like that meme of Don Draper from Mad Men, where he's in the elevator and he's like, I don't think about you at all.
Yeah. I think it's funny, when he's like giving his speech to the military and he's like, all we need to do is jump on every opportunity, and we need to be agile and flexible, and we need to respond to everything that comes. And then basically everyone in the room is just like awkwardly looking at each other, and it's just like, but can you be a little more specific? Like,
it's quite funny. This guy literally is like, that's a bit abstract. Can you go into more detail? And the other guy jumps in and is like, what he means is that we just have to take opportunities where they come. And Andrew Falk is like, we're just going to wing it.
Like, what he said. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've been in rooms with people like this before, and it made me want to like explode at the person, Andrew Falk himself, but I had no way to do it. I thought everyone else was being very polite.
Isn't this one of the prescient things about the show, which is he describes this strategy, which is essentially shock and awe, which is what America used in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is we'll just use overwhelming numbers, overwhelming amounts of technology and weaponry and stuff, and we'll just figure it out on the ground. We'll figure it out. We'll have no intelligence on what to pace things around. We'll improvise, like the great improvisational comedians of our time. We'll just figure it out, which is exactly what he's suggesting in this meeting. And that all turned out really well in real life, so no doubt it'll work great in the show. Yeah,
well, you say what you will about the Iraq War, it all just worked out fine in the end. So, I think this show must have released around the time that the first Gulf War was happening, because it seems like too much of a coincidence that, and I should have checked the dates before the podcast. It seems like too much of a coincidence, the similarities in the terrible strategy making. Although, of course, the first Gulf War, by basically every American metric, was a complete success. So, in that sense, it's way more prescient than.
Well, by their own metrics, America's never lost a war, right?
That's true.
They're like Alexander the Great, 21-0.
Yep.
Was Vietnam similarly mismanaged?
This is true, actually. Yeah, I mean, like Agent Orange, or the bombing of Cambodia, or all these sorts of things were all like very poorly imagined kind of policies, or very poorly imagined strategies. But yeah, it would be interesting to go like a deep dive into that at some point. How influenced was Legend of Galactic Heroes by America's conflicts in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Yeah, maybe it's just the way, because of where we're from, we view it this way, but a different viewer from somewhere else might see it differently. Yeah,
maybe war is just like this.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
It never changes, I hear. I was looking at the Wikipedia page for shock and awe as like a tactical strategy, and it was only defined and named in this way in 96.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, they state earlier examples that predate that, obviously, but I just thought it was interesting that term had not come into play, and he basically describes exactly this in the show.
Yeah. That is interesting. He also describes it as a crusade.
Yeah.
And that's
in
another
the room in front of everyone as well. It's not like in a one of the like outside conversation on the down low. It's like to everyone in the room. At least in terms of the subtitles that I had, he literally calls it a crusade. And he probably does in the Japanese as well, because that's when Yang Wenli, he like makes a like instinctive repulse movement in that moment when he hears that described as that.
Well, the Crusades famously a series of wars that went incredibly well. Just a stunning victory after stunning victory.
So good they kept trying to do it again and again.
Yeah, they just kept doing them again and again. They were so successful. Actually, that would have been interesting to look at what the actual Japanese word was when he said crusade, whether it was similar in tone or whether it was literally the word for crusade. But yeah, Yang Wenli does give this repulsed like look, that this is like an open appeal to ideology, like an open appeal to power, and an open appeal to like domination. She's not for, right? It's not his style.
I wasn't really sure whether I think after this whole thing happens, and then Yang Wenli's left in the room with just his senior, his boss, basically, and they're talking about Falk and what he was saying, and his boss, whose name I can't remember, describes Falk's rhetoric as being, I can't remember what he says, but like kind of well put together. Like this speech was delivered well, and like he, despite him not believing in it being a terrible idea, and he doesn't have a plan, all sort of things. He's his ability with speaking and rhetoric is good and will win people over, and that's like one thing he's maybe good at. And I wasn't really sure whether that was true. I mean, like when I was listening to Andrew Falk speak, and I know we were reading through the subtitles rather than the Japanese, which maybe is more eloquent, I didn't really get the impression that it was that impressive. I sort of felt that he came across as a bit of an idiot. And
you feel like it's
he had to be like
the Norm Macdonald, like, Hitler, he was a great orator, and then you watch videos of him, and he's like, "Ein kleinen Fliegen," he's like, I just don't buy it, right? Like, it's not for me.
It wasn't for me, that's true. But I also thought, like, at one point, one of the other seniors in the room has to, we already talked about it, has to, like, get involved and be like, what Vice Admiral Falk, whoever he is, it means in this moment is that this. And Falk was like, yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Like,
The thing,
if he was such a good speaker,
I failed to say.
yeah, then why would that have been required? So I don't know. I was just left a bit bemused by that, whether it was how he was supposed to come across.
Mm-hmm.
I think that issue is, as I've heard it described, is like the Studio 60 problem, which is there was a TV show in like the mid 2000s called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, and it was about a Saturday Night Live type program behind the scenes of that, and it was written by Aaron Sorkin, famed writer of The West Wing and other shows and films. And you know, the premise is these are the funniest people working on the funniest TV show in America, and then nothing's in the show is that funny.
How do you
so it's
write
really
that?
hard to believe the premise, you know. So if you describe someone as good at something, they have to then be good at it when you see them do the thing.
Yeah,
well, it's kind of like the BBC Sherlock series, right? Like where you're like, you have to convince the audience that this guy is really smart, and so the way they do it is with these stupid flashing montages. Because actually writing a smart character is really hard.
you
have
have
to
to be
smart. Yeah. Especially when the writer is an idiot.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny that we should look up his name. Is it Badshah?
Yeah, we should look up his name. He's reasonably important, isn't he?
He's very important.
Did you say Badshah?
Yeah.
That's that means like king in Hindi and Urdu.
There is a character called Badshah, but I don't think, and maybe this isn't him.
You're talking about Yang Wenli's boss, right?
Yeah. God, I can't find him. All right, well, we'll find him in post. Oh no, I got him. It's Sydney Sithole.
Let's call him Fleet Admiral Sydney, because his surname is much too close to. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Sid comes over to Yang Wenli, and he's talking about Falk. You know, he's like, oh, he's a great orator. He's the Cicero of our time. And then he's like, and he sees you, Yang, as a rival. Or sees other people as rivals. And then Yang Wenli's like, what are you talking about? And then Sydney says to him, my God, you're slow. Right? It's like this kind of like just exasperated, like, why do I have to spell everything out to you? And it made me think about our extremely uninformed discussions at the beginning of the podcast about whether we thought Yang Wenli was a Machiavellian genius, and just the fact that he has no idea like who is on his side and who isn't on his side.
And he's like, but I don't want that. It's like, it's not about what you want. It's about what really he thinks you want. Yeah, and he's like, oh, I don't even think about what I want.
It's true. He doesn't. It's one of his main problems, right? Like all the stuff he wants, like to be a historian or, you know, to live a peaceful civilian life, he actively moves away from it all the time, which may become a problem later in the series.
Yeah, probably be fine.
Probably not. It'll probably be fine.
Is that when old boss Sydney announces, whatever happens with this crazy war plan, I'm retiring?
Yeah.
Either in disgrace or in grace.
Yeah. I'm so done with this whole thing that either way, I'm out.
Yeah. I've been emotionally checked out for a long time, Yang. Lobos is going to take over, and after him, it should be you.
Yeah, it's like, while you're away,
I don't give a shit
in
anymore.
the next 100 days will be my birthday, and I will reach retirement age. So either way, I'm out.
And he was only 10 days from retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, is he going to die?
Yeah, it's going to be like McBain.
Yeah. If we see a flashback with Sydney and his granddaughter or something, he's dead for sure.
Yeah. So we have this conversation with Yang. Yang is basically told that Andrew Falk is your rival, and you should be watching out for him. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, but I thought that Yang Wenli simultaneously is like, this guy Andrew Falk is well beneath my notice, and also is like, I don't care, I'm not engaged, which is potentially going to be a problem down the line. I don't know, possibly.
He doesn't seem too bothered. He still just seems a bit like confused about the whole situation because he's never heard of this guy before, and suddenly it's like, you have a rival, and he doesn't know why or what to do, whether he needs to do anything about it.
It reminds me a bit about the Baron Flagle plots in on the Lowengram side. Now both of them have got a sniveling rival who's well beneath their notice.
Can I give you one of Kamel's big predictions?
I love this. Yeah,
we haven't had one for a while, actually.
Yeah.
Play the jingle and then we'll.
I'll put it in here.
Okay, cool.
Fork does not seem like this show feels like it's leading to an ultimate collision between Lowengram and Yang Wenli, and that is sort of the arc it is taking. And any other character that sort of mingles in and is an antagonist to one of these two cannot stick around that long, whether it be Flagle or Fork or another character that name begins with F. So like, he seems like he will not last beyond season 1 to me. He seems like a mini arc sort of antagonist. I'll play this when I'm wrong and he shows up in season 4 as the head of a new alliance. He seems like completely mid. He'll get killed in this military operation somehow. So I just, he ain't lasting.
All right, well, we're going to put that one in the old predictions vault.
Chamber,
the prediction chamber.
I don't remember any other prediction I've made about this show, by the way.
Yeah,
there definitely were some, but I don't remember.
There were some, I think it would be fun. This is slightly off topic, but it'd be fun after the end of season 1 to do like just a full predictions episode, and just talk about where we think the show is going to go.
It's a bit unfair on us, really, but so.
Yeah.
I think my predictions will be quite good.
Yeah,
that sounds fun. We can do that. Should we just finish off this episode with the final sort of thing the episode ends on, which is at the Phazon corridor?
Oh yeah. Before we move on to that, though, I was going to mention about Trunheit not standing up.
Oh yeah.
Which was very sneaky, right? That was I'd forgotten that detail when I rewatched the episode. The fact he's like arguing in favor of the war to the cabinet, and then he like, when the vote comes, he stays sitting down. And you're like, what a snake, man! What a snake!
And then they still approve the plan anyway, and he doesn't. He gets to he
gets other people to vote on his behalf, basically.
I got the sense it's so that when the operation goes wrong, he won't be dragged down by it. Yeah,
exactly.
And if it goes well,
there's the guy.
He'll also be fine.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have to retire.
The guy who stands up last is like watching Trunheit, and when Trunheit doesn't stand up, he stands up. And it's like there's clearly like it may not be like explicitly stated, but there's kind of an expectation that Trunheit's career, if you get yourself behind him, prove your loyalty now, because he's a rising star, it's going to pay off in the long run. I also wanted to say that there's a bit where Falk asks a question during the military hearing, and I just thought it's funny that he basically looks like the kind of guy who would say, this is more of a comment than a question, and that's exactly what he does. And I have more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, he does have that vibe. I was going to say in this episode, before we wrap up, that we also get a very brief cameo of Adrian Rubinsky on Phazon, where he basically somehow has got information about the fact that the Alliance are intending to launch this military campaign, and he just immediately leaks it to the Empire for his own gain. And when asked why, he's like, "I don't know. We basically belong to the Empire, and have we ever done anything that hasn't made you a load of money? I'm a loyal subject. And I tell me I'm wrong." And the guy's like, "Oh, I guess you're not wrong." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to my 100 lovers in this mansion now."
Yeah.
I got the sense when the narrator is re-describing Faizan again, and describing this relationship between Faizan and the Imperials and the Republic, it feels a bit like, maybe this is me revealing how little I know about Hong Kong, but Hong Kong and its relationship to the British and to China.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. I think it's definitely, it definitely makes sense like that, because you get the impression from Fazan that like the Empire and the Republic have to do business with each other, like they have to trade with each other. They're just, otherwise they would collapse. But because they're at war, they can't do it openly, so they do it through Fazan, and then Fazan as a result has just become astonishingly rich. I think we talked in the early episodes about Fazan feels to me like a more closer to like Venice or like Switzerland or Luxembourg, like one of these tiny little border states that basically does facilitate trade between neighbors and gets like, again, disgustingly rich. But Hong Kong is also a good call.
Singapore or something.
Or Singapore.
They mentioned that Faizan, or the narrator mentions that it was founded by Leopold Rapp, a merchant and native of Terra. That's what my subtitle said. Isn't Terra Earth?
Yeah. Holy Terra is Earth, yeah. In my subtitles, it said Earth.
I didn't realize Earth existed in the show.
We did actually talk about this, like, I think a few episodes ago. Yeah, where you were like, does it come up in the show? And we said, it does, but probably not in the way you think. Or like, it's not going to play the role that you might imagine.
Feel free to make another big prediction for the prediction chamber.
Yeah. Throw another one.
Maybe that's what your last prediction was about.
Yeah.
I call that a win then.
We'll see how consistent you are.
One thing that I thought was interesting, maybe just to anyone on Earth, just to me, which is that Adrian Rubinsky has his meeting with the Imperial at like a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And we talked about this before, that I feel that Adrian Rubinsky is clearly just Lex Luthor from Superman.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, I write and illustrate a comic called Khalil, which is a kind of Superman story. And I've been writing volume 2, which introduces my version of Lex Luthor. And my introduction of him is at a farmhouse in the middle of it's like exactly that scene. Which
Legend of the Galactic Heroes not only predicted the Second Iraq War, but it also predicted
season 2,
your comic book.
Yeah.
In one episode.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Efficient.
This show's getting better and better. It's like if I wrote it in some ways. So Rubinsky leaks that, hey, the Republic's going to invade somehow. Presumably he has spies in both the Empire and the Republic, one would presume.
Yeah, he's a schemer.
And then instantly the military are up and running, and they've got 30 million people, is it? Or 300 million?
30 million.
30 million people, 200,000 ships that they send out. And I looked this up, and I thought 30 million sounds like a lot of people to send out for a military operation.
Yeah.
And I looked up the biggest military operation ever, and it was like Operation Barbarossa, I think it's called. Barbarossa, yeah. And that was how many people? I just saw this.
Just shy of 1 million, was it?
10 million combatants taking part.
10 million? I was slightly off.
I guess that's from all sides, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, this is one thing that space opera consistently gets wrong, and I praised Legend of the Galactic Heroes in the first episode for getting the numbers more right than most space operas do. But 30 million is still pretty small when you're talking like empires that span thousands of planets, or it's like a consistent problem with space opera writing.
That didn't bother me so much. I just assumed all the numbers were scaled up. Distances, amounts, just everything's just by a factor of 10 or 100.
Yeah. I would have liked to see people be drafted for the campaign. Like, we don't really see the human cost of this, like raising this massive army at all in this episode. And it's a very dense episode. Like, there's a lot that happens in a very short time. But it would have been nice to just have a couple of scenes where we see people receiving the draft letter or, being called up to war. And instead of just being told people don't want to fight anymore, people are tired of fighting, we see those people like being forced to go back to war.
Yeah, true.
Yep. To get stop lost. Is that what they call it?
What is that?
Klopstocked.
Klopstock lost.
I don't know what they call it.
Is it stop loss? That's when the American military call you back up for a third tour.
It's a 2008 American war drama film. So
but the film is about being stop lost.
Involuntary extension of a service member's active duty. Yeah.
You can say things when your vassals are upset that you've still got their armies raised.
Yeah. Just like that. But yeah, it would have been good to see some human cost associated with this army that just sort of appears out of nowhere. But otherwise, I think a pretty good episode. I had a lot of fun watching this one.
I think it had a really happy ending. I was pleased with, where the narrator says, once again, the galaxy will be smeared with blood, and then close credits.
He does this every time. He does this every time.
It was a real curveball, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, he's such a downer. Like you see like people being happy together. Yang Wenli's just met his sweetheart again, and it's like little did they know the horrors that were about to befall them.
Yeah, but more visceral than that, I thought, like smeared with it's quite smeared with blood.
I'm gonna in the episode I'm gonna play a little recording of the narrator saying that, just so I can go take a bathroom break really quickly. So I'll just use that as a gap.
Okay,
I'll be right back.
No problem.
And now we can have our popular segment, the spoiler zone.
Oh, the spoiler zone. And the spoiler zone is that I actually forgot to write any notes for this episode, so I'm just going purely off the cuff.
I see. This was one of the first few that I did actually write some notes down. So
you're carrying the episode.
Yeah. Well, the second episode, I didn't really have much to write down about the second episode, actually, for one reason or another.
Yeah.
I've got written down episode 12. Spaceships are back. But then they weren't really back that much. I got a bit ahead of myself.
No, they make a brief appearance.
This episode, I actually think in my memory, I got mixed up with the one that comes after it. I kind of blended the two together.
Well, the one that comes next after this, now we're in the spoiler zone. The one that comes next is pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
I think that's why I blended them together.
Yeah.
Because I almost felt like this one was setting up. I assume they happen in the same place and stuff, but I don't think they actually do.
I think they do.
Oh, do they?
Happen in the same place.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, maybe I do remember. Then it would have maybe been better to watch both of them. But anyway,
I think so. We probably messed up though.
Yeah.
But, yeah. All right. That's enough spoilers.
Well, that concludes the spoiler zone. So we can move on.
Yeah.
Episode 13. Yes.
Let's talk episode 13.
When it rains, it pours.
I don't know if that's what it's called.
That's not what it's called. And you know that's not what it's called.
It's called episode 13. Spaceships are back.
That's definitely what it's called on my Plex server.
Is it really?
Well, it's not called that on the thing that Joel copy and
Official
pasted from the Galactopedia, whatever they call it. What is it called?
Guineapedia.
Guineapedia. Do you want me to read this out?
If I could share my screen with you, I would show you that it says when it rains, it pours.
Oh, I'm sorry. I falsely accused you of making up the name of the episode. That's a much better name
much
than...
catchier title. Episode 13, When the Rain of Grief Comes. On the 22nd of August, 796 UC. The invasion of the Galactic Empire begins. Reinhard von Lohengram implements a scorched earth strategy. All food is taken from the frontier zone, so the Liberation Force of the Free Planets Alliance will be forced to feed the inhabitants. Reinhard plans to attack the invading fleets when their supply lines become overstretched. Commodore Ulrich Kessler carries out the order, but in the process has to face someone from his past.
It's a really short summary.
It is a bit of a short summary, yeah.
They also were bored by the B plot in this episode, I guess.
Is it the B plot or the whole plot?
It's kind of the A plot and the B plot, yeah. There are good things about this episode. I don't think it's a terrible episode.
No, I like the guy with the beard.
Yeah, he's great.
You're supposed to like him, obviously. He's very sort of, he's a good...
Honourable
kind of guy. I like the bit where the kind of old farmer is moving a box with one of the younger farmers and they're having a discussion, and the younger one is like, yeah, the Alliance is going to come and they're going to liberate us, and the old farmer's like, I don't really want to be liberated. Actually, our Lord's a pretty good guy, and we have a nice life, and this is going to just get turned into a battlefield, so we're better off right now. And the young guy is still a bit like, yeah, but maybe liberation, which I thought kind of summed up the
I mean, that scene is one of the ones that I remember most clearly from my first watch, because I remember it. I was like, I wish the rest of the episode were this good, right? Like, where there's just a discussion, very short discussion between two people, where you see how people actually feel about what's happening to them, rather than like what's going on in the Aristo castle, with figuring out who's going to be my heir and all this kind of stuff, which I don't really care about. But people dealing with the reality of being liberated, quote unquote, is much more interesting.
Can I tell you what this episode reminded me of?
Go on.
It reminded me of my experience recently of playing the video game Final Fantasy 16.
Interesting.
And I'll tell you why. Because a lot, the game sort of deals with two things, which is it deals with its main characters, which are big, important characters that the fate of the world relies on. Your Yang Wenlis and your Lohengrams, yes? And the other half is about the regular people and the struggles they have while these big people are dealing with their big problems. We're just trying to live and trying to survive. And it's how one does not care about the other, and how those two are linked via causation, and I understood the points they were trying to make by telling that story, as I understand the point they're trying to make when they're telling the story in this episode. The issue I found is I was so deeply bored when they were dealing with the regular people in that game that I just pressed the X button over and over again to get through their dialogue. So I did not give a flying fuck. And that's a failure of the writing, and I similarly did not care about the regular people on this one world.
That's fair.
It was just so boring to me.
Yeah. I guess what I was saying is not that I care about this farmer and his son, more I care about the ideological difference between them, right? Like the young members of the Empire being more open to liberation. But yes, I agree. When they're like gathering up their boxes of bread and giving them over to the Imperial Army, I don't know. They've not really set up stakes properly. I don't really.
Yeah, I think most of the episode deals with the like this I don't know what he is, the Lord and his daughter-in-law and his grandson, and then this Imperial captain who has history on the planet or is from the planet or something, and therefore you don't. I don't know. You see the effect that this is going to have on them, but you don't really see the effect that it's going to have on the everyday people. Even when the episode is kind of about that, nobody really gets any lines other than this noble family. So it's sort of about them. And I think the Lord who is running the planet is kind of, he's okay. He's interesting enough. The characters of his daughter-in-law and grandson are not particularly interesting and very well developed, I don't think.
No, yeah.
Or this Imperial captain either, really, who, I don't know, had a thing with the daughter-in-law and then just became a soldier, and that's kind of the whole story.
Yeah.
And now he's back and he feels bad, but he's also, that's kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's many reasons why the story doesn't really work very well. I think number one, like the Lord or the Baron, if he had made any other choice, right, like in this story, then his character would just be completely superfluous.
Yeah.
There is no, there's no version of the story where he takes the cowardly route and goes back to Odin, where we even remember him, right? Like he just becomes like a footnote character. Yeah. So he has to do this, like for the sake of the narrative, which then just makes him kind of far less interesting than he might have been. The show is trying to show us like the damage of war arriving in the Empire, but we've already seen it so many times in other settings or, in the actual battles themselves. And I guess the main point of the episode is Reinhardt's brutal, like, scorched earth policy, where he's withdrawing support from the frontier. But within this episode, there is no consequence for that.
He doesn't even face the consequence of Kirkjais. I think in other episodes,
Kirkjais just sits there.
Yeah, he gets like he listens. Yeah, when he comes up with a strategy,
just wasn't listening.
Yeah, you can't tell. Like it focuses on Kirkjais' face when Lohengrin delivers his plan about starving his own people off the frontier.
Yeah,
and we have discussed before that maybe like the animators they don't really change Kirkjais' face enough to the extent that some people might have misinterpreted Kirkjais as some sort of weird sociopath. But I don't know what you're supposed to. I mean, all I could interpret from this is that it was all intentional to linger on his face for that long and not change the expression at all. That he just agrees and he doesn't have a better plan either, and he's kind of fine with it.
Well, the reason why Lohengrin turns to him is because Kirkjais is his conscience, right? We've already seen this in their flashback episodes, that Lohengrin is actually not a very good person when he's left to his own devices, and will use violence and all those kind of things to get his ends. And so he is looking to Kirkjais for approval for this thing that he's not really sure whether it's the right thing to do. And yeah, Kirkjais is just, he's got like the Homer Simpson monkey in his brain, with like the symbols. He's just not really paying attention or gives tacit approval, which I guess is what it's supposed to imply.
I think that is probably what it's supposed to imply. Although I do like the idea of him just having zoned out and like thinking about Anna Rose or something. It's like, what are we doing? Seems good. I vote with Lohengrin.
Yeah.
I got the sense that he hadn't. It was more like, well, I've brought up my issues with how you operate in the past, and it doesn't have any sway with you, so I'm just not going to say anything. That's how it read to me. But again, he's impossible to read.
Yeah, that's possible. I think the main reason why maybe you could argue he is okay with it is because they do trust the Democratic Republic to deliver food to these people. So this is not like a policy of intentional starvation. It is a cruel policy, but it is not a policy of intentional starvation. So that was kind of my interpretation of maybe why he was okay with it.
Right.
That he could see that it wasn't going to cause long-term harm.
There's an episode.
One of
There's
my
a bit
favorite
of this.
moments from the. Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Maybe it's gonna be the same one. I want to see what you're saying.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, I'll tell you. It was when Kessler gets the message from the Empire saying this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think this is what I was going to say.
And it goes to the communicator, the navigator guy with the weird headgear on his head, and he's got cables coming out, which implies to me like that it should all be coming into his head, like he is the communication platform. But then he just reads it off a screen, so the headgear does nothing as far as I can tell. And then when he reads the message on the screen, you see it on the screen, and what it says is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. He's like, oh my God, Commander, are you reading this?
It's the only note I've got written down, and I like nearly went back and screenshotted it to send it to you guys. I thought it made me laugh out loud. I thought it caught me off guard. It was very funny.
It's like, Commander, you should see this. My God.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That was going to be the thing.
That's the best bit of the episode, yeah.
I also love that navigator guy in the weird headgear. His chair is it's not like a regular chair. It's like a chair from Alien or something, and it's got three arms that are plugged into the ground, and it's leaning forward like it's about to topple over at all times. It's just extremely strange design choices that seemingly come from nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of strange design choices, did you enjoy the Imperial Germanic bed frame with a digital Casio clock, just installed in the bed frame?
Yeah,
I don't remember this.
When Ulrich is falling asleep,
he can't sleep.
He can't sleep.
It's like 1 a.m.
And he turns over and he does the thing that you do with your phone, and you just slap it, with your hand to try and get it to turn on. And it's it's 1 a.m. But the clock is built into the bed frame. Say what you want about the Empire, they've got a distinct visual style. Just mangling 80s technology into just German decor.
It is so great seeing this humble farming town, and then far in the distance is this giant warship of the Imperials just landing down on it. The mishmash it's good.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of the reasons why a foolish person may have been hopeful for the remake of the show, because I think aesthetically there's a deep well of potential in this, juxtaposing these warships with basically World War I, World War II Europe. But apparently, unfortunately, the new show's bad.
I wonder if you've not seen the new show, right?
No. I've seen bits and pieces.
I wonder if, presumably all the references to the wars in this version of the show, the one we're watching, is for the wars from the 80s and 70s, and that the current one is in reference to, 2000s era Iraq and Afghanistan and things like that.
I'm not going to say that's impossible, but given what I know about the show, I think most of the references are to explosions that some guy made on his computer, or CGI space battles.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
because that's what they do with Iron Man, right? When he was first written as a character, he was taken in Korea, I think, or Vietnam or something like that, and then over the years they've updated that to different guys in different regions of the world. They took him because Tony Stark sold weapons to different guys. So I'm just curious if they went ahead and updated that or not.
Maybe I'll watch the new show eventually, and then I can report back.
That sounds like a Patreon goal to me.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It sounds like you'd have to pay me to do that.
So you're probably fine. You probably won't have to suffer.
The romance between Ulrich and Via.
Via.
Incredibly boring. I'm sorry. Like a good romance, or even a good romance story. I'm not opposed to these things in your space opera or anything. They're like the meat and potatoes of character plot. I don't know who this Ulrich guy is yet, right? Like we've not spent any time with him. I certainly don't know who this Via person is. We only just met her in this episode.
We've talked before about, and we'll talk again in the future about the kind of homoerotic, whatever you want to call it, relationships in the show, or you could just call it, a different version of masculinity. Or there's a lot to talk about, but the heterosexual relationships are always really boring,
Incredibly boring.
And this was just another one, I think, just boring and. Yeah, I have very little to say about it.
I think the
kind of generic
homoromantic relationships in the show are one of the best things about the show. They're like top tier, top 10 reasons why you should watch Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
I think like when Kirkiais and Lohengrin were standing on the balcony again in this episode, and they're talking about the rain falling, and he says, "Oh, you're such a poet." It's like, I'm not a poet. I'm just sentimental. I was like, yeah, okay. This felt like
what your
more...
subtitle said.
Yeah.
It said I'm just sentimental.
Yeah.
In mine, it said, I'm not a poet. I'm just womanish.
A little more on the nose. Yeah.
I wonder which is the direct translation.
Yeah. I love them both. They just stand there on the balcony, just saying things to each other in like every episode.
Yeah. Anyway, this seems more romantic to me than the actual like sort of throwback romantic relationship that's supposed to be going on the frontier. But I don't know. Maybe
between a soldier and his child bride.
Yeah.
That little scene where she's like, chase me, or you'll, and if you do, you'll marry me. Felt like a parody of whatever that kind of scene is. It was real tough to watch.
Not a solid episode, not a great one, but I think these two episodes are pretty important together and do flow into each other. And I think probably we should have watched the third one as well. Oh well, we live and learn.
I'll tell you my two moments I found funny in this episode. They're not meant to be funny, I don't think. Which is when dear old granddad who runs the town. I forget his name. The bearded man. Anyway, you know who I mean.
I know who you mean.
When he tells Kessler, "I ain't leaving. I'm going down with the ship, but just promise me that you'll take my daughter-in-law and my grandson away." And he says, "I swear I'll do anything to keep them safe."
Yeah.
And then he goes to her, and he's like, "Come with me," and she's like, "No," and she's like, "Damn, okay, I tried." Goodbye, my childhood love.
That is funny. I hadn't really made that connection, but it's true. He's like, I swear it to you on my life. I'll bring your daughter and your grandson back to Odin. And then she's like, nah. He's like, damn, didn't expect that.
The one that got away.
Which leads to my other moment.
Should have been me that married her. What more could I have done?
Yeah.
There was no other way. So they pack up all the food from the town, the one town on this planet.
Funny.
Which I also enjoyed. Very Starfield is what I hear. That's how Starfield works. And so they pack up and then they leave, and the camera shows the planet, and then the Empire getting out of there, and the camera pans over, and who's just arrived? The Republic, right on time.
Yeah.
And that felt very sitcom-esque, like the timing of
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's right behind me, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't really think there's too much more to say about these episodes, or that episode particularly.
Yeah, agreed.
I did have another comment about the first episode, though, episode 12, which maybe is a good one to end on, because Yang Wenli basically posits the entire question of the show directly to the audience in episode 12, which I thought was an important moment. He's like, the people, the Democratic Republic is terribly run, and the Empire is terribly run. Who are we to say which one's better? And then basically everyone in the room is like, so true. And then they just move on. And you're like, can you just say your premise like that? I didn't realize that was allowed.
Subtext is for cowards. We all know this.
Yeah. I think that was the last episode as well, right? Subtext is for cowards.
Is that going to be a running theme throughout the show?
I mean, it's a space opera. I wouldn't expect,
Yeah, that's true enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, you say that, but then I think about how people don't realize when they watch Star Wars that the Empire is America and the rebels are like Vietnam, which is it's like explicitly what it is.
Yeah.
And people don't get what America is the bad guy. So like I understand the impulse of a writer to say no subtext. We just have to say it.
Yeah, right. You're saying that George Lucas overestimated his audience.
I think time has proven that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George, if you're listening, we'd love you on the show.
Either George Lucas or retired filmmaker George Lucas.
George, yeah.
Is there just the one writer on this show?
I think there's one writer of the original stories. I don't know about the writers of the show. I'd imagine there's more than one.
So I wonder if there's like, oh, this is the good writer, and he writes these ones, like some TV shows have.
That would be good, actually.
Yeah.
We should include that in our show notes before each episode.
It's like how people are with Doctor Who, right? They're like, oh, who wrote this one? Maybe skip this one.
Stephen Moffat. Skip this one. I got two burns in on a guy. Nobody expected it. All right, well, I suppose that's it. Kind of wish we'd watched the third one. Now we're going to have to talk about this episode again next time.
What, really?
Yeah, the next episode is a direct follow-on from this one.
Oh, but we don't have to talk about all of Kessler's.
Oh no, we don't have to talk about Ulrich's romance or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good stuff. I mean, 1 out of 2 isn't bad in terms of a hit rate.
Yeah.
I like the first one quite a bit.
Yep.
I think this second one was, just watchable. It wasn't. It was, it was fine.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if it's the weakest one we've watched, but
no, I don't think so.
It's close.
It's close.
What's the weakest one?
Didn't we watch like? Okay.
Is it the Death of Nero? That one or the
that one? Yeah, Empire's Afterglow. Yeah, that one. Right. And with the guy who gets stabbed by his courtiers. That one's pretty weak.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Klopstop incident, but that actually rules. That's a good one.
That episode's really good. It's like a Poirot episode. It's great. With an exploding
it was a lot more fun. Yeah.
Have people written like, how there are guides for Naruto or One Piece to say you can skip these ones, but you should definitely watch these ones.
Yeah.
Have people written guides for this show for that?
I'm sure they have. We should also include that in our show notes before we talk about the episode.
Okay, next time.
And be like, we're going to watch them all, but this one on the official, this guy's blog list is listed as a skip. So
So you can skip this episode you're listening to right now.
You can skip our episode talking about it.
Mm.
Maybe we should
Has
also
anyone-
publish our own list.
That's like Andrew
which-
Falk level of strategy, I think.
I think publishing our own list is good. That's a good. We can give it a skip or not.
That would actually be solid. We can do that. I think
Empty. Blank.
Yeah, I think we should watch all of them. But I think we can go through and rank them, as yes, no, maybe, or
That's a good idea. We should put a Google sheet together.
Yeah, that sounds good.
120, whatever, and then yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, let's do that.
And then we can put our star ratings there as well. Our ratings we gave each at one.
Like our personal star ratings.
Yeah, because we've done that at the end of episodes. Mine are going to be sevens all the way down. Sevens.
Yeah. But throughout the series, they're like the standard of 7. This is a much higher 7 than the 7s I was giving out at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
I just think 7 is such an impossible rating for people to understand. Like, if they see a 7, they think it means bad.
Yeah.
But 7 is good.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah, I don't know if it's connected, but if you ask someone to come up with a number at random, people like way more likely than any other number will say 7. Like if you say between 1 and 10. So maybe that's why it feels so
Globally,
mediocre as a number.
Is that the case?
I don't know about globally, actually. That's a good study.
Yeah. Isn't what's the lucky number in Japan? Is it 8 or something like that?
I think it's 8. Yeah. 4 in Chinese is unlucky. I don't know if that carries over to Japan.
Right. Okay. My last question before we hang it up is has anyone done a re-edit project of this show where they because it could use it, I think. Like people have done One Piece, the one that's been retimed to match the manga as best as possible.
Yep.
There's also like Dragon Ball Kai and Naruto Kai and stuff where they cut it down a lot. Any for this, or we're not doing that?
That's a good question. We can look it up. I mean, if we receive a bunch of money on Patreon, I will do that project with you. We can do it together.
A fan edit.
Yeah, fan edit. I'll definitely do that. I have no skill in editing, but if you're willing to pay me for it, then I'll do it.
You can learn. It's not that hard, I think.
Yeah, it's not that hard, surely.
Every Gen Z person does it.
It's true. Yeah. And given that I'm older than a Gen Z person, that must mean I'd be better at it. Yeah.
That's the rule. Yeah.
As you get older, you just get smarter.
That's why, like the president of the United States is typically a really old person.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you obviously would want to put the smartest person in as your leader.
Yeah.
Not just the US. It's so well known that many countries follow this policy.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason why Alexander the Great was so successful is because people hadn't figured this out yet.
But he had an old soul,
Oh, yeah. He'd been around the block.
Yeah. In more ways than one, because he was riddled with syphilis.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool. That's the episode.
Yep.
We do an outro.
We do an outro.
Once again, the galaxy will be smeared with blood.
Good. Good. I'm glad you said that. That's the one we end on.
Yeah. Let's just end there. Thanks for listening to this episode of In the Skies of Love. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. If you have any comments or questions, please reach out to us at intheskiesoflove@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon, which you can go to and give us money. You can find Kamel at HiKamel on Twitter, and Tom and Joel have no Twitter presence. Tune in next time for our review of episodes 14 and 15. Until then, we'll see you in the skies of love.